welcome everybody to the January 16th call meeting, official time 6 o'clock. If I could get a approval of agenda, please.
Motion to approve.
You got a second? Second, all in favor, aye? Aye. Everybody stand up and remove your hats. I'll start it off with an invitation. Let us pray. Dear Lord, sermon this past Sunday I heard it's never a prayer that you can't ask for help. Dear Lord, we ask for the help of this community. We ask you to look down at this community. You know where our needs are, dear Lord. You know what the needs of each and every person in this room are. I lift those needs up to you, dear Lord. You bless us in so many ways. You bless us at the time of birth, a new child. You bless us through our life, but the biggest blessing of all is our eternal life. With all these blessings, dear Lord, I ask that you be with this Board of Commissioners as they make the decisions that are willing to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, when I get started off, I get Mr. Petrowski, if you would, open us up on the...
Chairman, our first item is the request by the Jones County Board of Commissioners to amend the Comprehensive Land Development Resolution to create sections 32.24, 74.225, and 96.7 to establish standards to allow data centers as a conditional use in the M2 district. The Planning Commission has recommended approval of this request 2-1.
All right. You have a... How we're going to proceed, please.
Yes, sir, Chairman. These will be the rules for the hearing. Speakers, they have proponents of the proposed zoning decision shall have a minimum of 10 minutes to present evidence, information, and/or arguments supporting the proposed decision. Opponents of the proposed zoning decision shall likewise have a minimum of 10 minutes to present evidence, information, and/or argument in opposition to the proposed decision. If the proponents or opponents cannot agree on an equitable distribution of the allotted 10 minutes, then the chairman or his or her designee will determine how the time will be divided. In any event, every person who wishes to speak, whether in support, opposition, or otherwise, shall have a minimum of 1 minute to speak. If either the proponents or the opponents of an application collectively take more than 10 minutes, then the other's time shall be extended similarly if desired. The county attorney or some other designee of the chairman shall keep time.
All right, thank you, Tim. I respectfully ask everybody to be respectful to your neighbor. When given the time to speak, address the board, please, not the crowd. Please refrain from interruption or talking because this is a public meeting and everybody wants to be able to hear. Some of us have problems hearing, so if you get to start talking or your neighbor can't hear what's going on, we appreciate the non-interruption. Ms. Brody will be keeping the time for the discussion. When the time is up, Ms. Brody or I1 will ask you to stop. There will be no time sharing on discussion. Allow one speaker to be allotted more time than in the meeting. At this time, Mr. Gerard, would you like to open up?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. First of all, introduction. My name is Ken Gerard. I'm an attorney from the metro area that Jones County has been kind enough to retain to come down and assist with the discussion and possible enactment of the ordinance that we're here to talk about today, and it has been an honor and privilege to do so. So I do have a few things I need to go over with the board before we open it up to the public comments, and so if you will just indulge me with a little bit of time, and Mr. County Manager, I will be asking you shortly to put up on the screen the version of the code that I at least want the board to consider this evening. So with that sort of introduction, I'm going to start walking through some of my comments. So first of all, the county's land use code, section 151, allows a proposed amendment to the text to be initiated by the Board of Commissioners. And you all actually did that in October of last year. You all did initiate that text amendment process. Section 153 of the code provides that the Planning Commission will conduct the public hearing for a text amendment to the Comprehensive Land Development Resolution, and the Planning Commission did in fact do that on Monday of this week, on January 12th, based upon a notice that had been placed in the paper, I believe, on December 25th, but that did in fact run for 18 days before that public hearing. With respect to the standards and the hearing protocols, you've got actually two sections in your code that address that, both sections 118, 118.1 through 118.26, and 151 through 155 of the resolution set the hearing procedures and standards governing the exercise of the legislative power to modify the land use resolution. As your planning director ably pointed out, with respect to the January 12th public hearing, the Planning Commission is required to make a recommendation, and they did that. They made a recommendation to approve the draft of the M2 conditional use permit for a data center that was in front of them. The vote was 2-1. And then pursuant to section 151.2 of your code, you now have an obligation to render a final decision upon that proposal within 30 days of receipt of the Planning Commission's recommendation. All right. So that is sort of just some of the introductory parliamentary and procedural aspects. I am not going to attempt to go through every aspect of what occurred at the January 12th public hearing. You all have been provided a video of that public hearing and have had an opportunity to review the public feedback. That was the public hearing. That is what I call the zoning procedures law required public hearing. I know that you run these meetings today like a public hearing, and that's excellent, that's great, but that was the one that was the actual, I call it the ZPL required public hearing. Just a very quick overview of some of the concerns. A lot of the focus, and again, I'm not attempting to be a surrogate or a summary of every comment. There were a lot of really good comments that were made, but water quality and supply concerns, sort of an overarching theme was environmental concerns were raised, and we're going to go over that when we get into the actual code itself, but there was a lot of discussion about the environmental assessment, who's paying for it, how thorough is it going to be, and what were the criteria for assessment of it. There were also quite a few concerns about noise and the allowable decibel levels, including the frequency at the property line that was raised more than once, and including, you know, almost a segue into just overall health concerns with respect to the proximity to one of these data centers was another element that was raised at the Planning Commission public hearing. There were concerns raised with respect to the ambiguities in the ordinance, concerns that there was not sufficient detail in some of the definitions, that it was too loose, that there was information that was not made clear when it was required and to who it was to be supplied to. And I will go over that with you when we get into the actual detail of the version I want you to take a look at this evening. Buffers and setbacks was another issue that was raised at the Planning Commission, and I think there was some dissatisfaction or at least a concern expressed as to the 100, 200-foot buffer and setbacks that were in the version of the code that was in front of the Planning Commission. So again, that's a summary. There were a lot of additional concerns raised, but if I was to put it into buckets, those were the bigger buckets that I heard. I would also submit to you that at the public hearing, representatives of the Development Authority also made a presentation, and they provided an alternative version. Now, I would submit to you that it took the version that was in front of the Planning Commission and did make some red line recommendations, and I believe, you know, I have been tasked and retained to assist the board in reviewing those modifications, and I have done that. And if there's anything that I felt made the draft code better, I'm here to recommend it to you, and if I didn't think it made the code better, I'm not going to recommend it to you. So that's just sort of the function that you have assigned to me, and I'm comfortable doing that. Could we put up on the screen, is it possible to put up on the screen the version I would like the board to consider this evening? All right, so, and again, I know we're gonna have to scroll through it, to get everybody there, but some of the modifications that the Development Authority recommended were actually in the preamble, in other words, sort of the non-text, as far as the substantive text of the code. But it's sort of where, in the whereases, that's where governments and ordinances will sort of draft some of the public policy rationales, sort of the why behind the ordinance, as opposed to the actual substantive elements of the code itself. And so there was a general request that some of the language making this change uniquely as to the industrial park be reconsidered. I would submit to you that I think that may be the focus of where the board is anyway, the industrial park, but I don't know that that language needed to be in the whereas. So I was happy to comfortably remove that. Again, when we're talking about the whereases, I'm not going to spend a lot of time thinking about that because it's not really a portion of the code. It's sort of just some of the aspirational policy language. If we could move down to a little further into, we're going to call it 74.22. If you could scroll down a little further, keep going. Yeah, right there, thank you. Under the conditional uses, there was some language in there that said that there is nowhere, if this ordinance was to be adopted, where a data center would be a use as of right. And I want to quickly explain that to the board. A conditional use is a use that you have to get an additional zoning-based approval for. That is what I have been recommending, and I know your county attorney has been recommending the use permit model. And I think the Development Authority was saying, well, could we, perhaps temper that and say that there might be an opportunity. I think right now, my sense of the board is we want to make it very clear that right now there is no as-of-right use for a data or as-of-right opportunity for a data center in Jones County, even if you approve this tonight. So we did not make that change, is the point I'm making to you. We did consider adding that in order for this language, an applicant, that language wasn't in there, an applicant to seek an M2 conditional use, the idea being that an applicant would be a third party or a private entity that might request a use permit for a data center, whereas a lot of times, and this is very common among zoning ordinances, if the government itself wants to have a data center somewhere or any use somewhere, it's not really considered an applicant. You are the governing authority of the county, so you're not really considered an applicant. So I was comfortable with that language. A little further down, if we could, going to the, right there, yes, a little farther up. Right there, okay. Yeah, that's not exactly, right now, see, the setbacks are 200 foot from all property lines. All right, let me go ahead and tell you that I know that has been an issue. There was a lot of discussion about that at the public hearing, and I do think the Board of Commissioners wanted to maybe do some business with that. That doesn't capture some of the language that was discussed, but one of the things that has been discussed I want to bring to you, and again, whenever we're making the ordinance more stringent or stronger, I'm very comfortable with the Board of Commissioners doing that this evening. If you're making something tougher and more stringent, I'm comfortable with that. And so one of the arguments that has been made was that 200 feet of a setback is not sufficient. And so some language we have talked about was 200 feet from all property lines except 400 feet for buildings or structures that generate noise. If the idea is there's a concern that a noise generating structure is 200 feet from a property line, it may be the board doesn't want that. And that would be some language that would say if there is a building or a structure that is going to generate noise because of whatever the processes that are going on inside it, that's going to have to be 400 feet back from a property line. So I want the board to think about that, and that is something that we can talk about or you all can deliberate on. I would also want some language on that setback paragraph that says that the setback requirement may be adjusted by the board as part of the use permit approval process. You have that flexibility anyway, but sometimes if you put it in the code, it at least makes anybody applying understand the board has the right to adjust those setbacks further. Okay. Going to the buffer requirements, I know that there was some concern about the 100-foot buffer, and I believe I received some feedback that a 200-foot buffer is where the board would like to be, and so I do have some language like that prepared for you. And I would still like the buffer requirement. I would still like that language to say that buffer too can be adjusted by the board as part of the use permit approval in any future application. Once again, you're putting people on notice that this is a use permit, and the board has the keys to the kingdom with respect to a use permit to include adjusting those setbacks and buffers to make sure that they are in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Jones County. Okay. All right. If we can go a little further, just go to the next page if you don't mind. Yeah, stop right there. Let me see if there's anything on this page that I want to do business with the county. Yeah, on the accessory structures, we just modified the internal text cross-reference and changed the number there to make sure it aligned with the existing code. That's a non-substantive recommendation. On 11, with respect to on-site power generation, the draft in front of the Planning Commission said because of the water demands inherent in data centers, power generation via a steam-based power system will only be authorized with another use permit approval. We've taken out the because of the water demands, but the prohibition or the use permit approval remains, so a non-substantive change. Non-substantive. Go to the next page if you don't mind. Stop right there. Yes, sir. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the noise. The DBA, the noise was a issue that was raised at the Planning Commission repeatedly. And so I want the board to think about, right now it says data center, 65 dBA daytime, 55 dBA nighttime. I've received some feedback that the board may be willing to entertain a 55 dBA daytime and a 45 dBA nighttime. Let me repeat that. 55 dBA daytime, 45 dBA nighttime. So I do want the board to consider that change as well. Keep scrolling down a little bit more. You can keep going. And keep going a little farther, right there. Okay, so the rest of the changes were mainly the timing of when information was going to be required. So I want to talk about the environmental impact study first of all. One of the things, and this is in front of the draft that you have in front of you right now, and if you look on the next to last page of that draft under the environmental study, the environmental language has been tweaked. And again, this is to make it, I believe, more rigorous. So again, I want to first start off with the idea that if the Jones County Board of Commissioners is mainly thinking right now that data centers, to the extent that they belong in Jones County, may belong in the industrial park. So I want to just put that as our hypothetical on the table for a moment. All right, well, there is a lot of environmental work that has been done at the industrial park already. All right, and that's just true. And so there is. The idea is, however, we want an environmental impact with respect to the piece of land that a data center is proposed for. That's true. But really what the board also wants is once the proposal begins to take shape, not just at the zoning stage, but at the building permit stage, the board wants to get very granular about the environmental impact once we know things like building layout, the configuration of the property, where it will be located, in proximity to what different exterior uses or adjacent uses. And that's where we want to put a lot of meat on the more granular environmental study. So the idea is that there would be a twofold environmental study. There would be a baseline environmental study that would have to be supplied to the director as part of the use permit application. It would travel with the application. The Board of Commissioners would have their authority to review that application during the use permit process. And you would have the right to demand more information even during the use permit process. That's the baseline. You would also have the ability, if you happened to approve a data center, and again, remember, that's a discretionary approval, not required to, but if you do, you could then add conditions that would establish greater environmental benchmarks that would have to be satisfied before a building permit could be accepted and issued. That's what this sort of new language would do, is it would sort of bake in this twofold environmental review. A initial baseline that can be augmented, can be enhanced, but then at the time of building permit, you could require more. We're putting it into the code not because you don't have the right to do it now, you would, but simply to ensure that everybody that wants to do business in Jones County could read the code and understand this is going to be a heavy environmental lift for you. All right. I would also submit to you that an environmental study that is based on certainty is one that is better than it is based on uncertainty or a lack of concreteness, if that makes sense. When they're getting around to trying to get a building permit, their plan is going to be fairly concrete. So that's why that has been looked at. The remainder is fairly non-substantive. I do propose some language that says that, because I just want it clear, that any applicant, in addition to having to comply with your code and with whatever conditions that you impose, is obviously going to have to comply with all other local, state, and federal regulations. And I'm going to recommend to you that if there is a conflict between the zoning code or the conditions or a state and federal regulation, that the more rigorous of those apply. And so we do want to add that. Board members, that is the nuts and bolts of the changes that I am recommending. We may need to work on making sure we get the right draft, because I don't think that's the right draft that we put up there, because I would like that to be seen with the blue lines on it. Okay. And we can work on that while y'all are having the public hearing or the discussion. They can come up and we'll try to get that on there. I'd like to walk through that prior to any vote tonight. But I've just gone over it, and as you can see, it's all slanted sort of in one direction, and that is making this a more rigorous code and trying to address some of the concerns that were raised at the Monday, January 12th hearing. Mr. Chairman, those are my overview points, and at this point, I will turn it back over to you or Ms. Ashley or the director to run the public hearing.
All right, any questions before we turn it over? If not, the 10-minute of the for this request, would you like to come forward?
I've got a little PowerPoint that I sent over to the county. I think Tim was gonna, or someone was gonna run that up on the screen. Chairman Widener and members of the Board of Commissioners, my name is Jeff Haymore. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Dillard Sellers. Our address is 1776 Peachtree Street in Atlanta. I represent the Jones County Development Authority. As Mr. Gerard was discussing, the Development Authority owns the industrial park in the southern part of the county. I'll go through that in just a second. And it supports the policy that would allow for, in the future, a potential data center use within the industrial park. Obviously, tonight you're considering that policy, an amendment to your zoning ordinance. If we could just go to the next slide there. As this slide says, zoning is basically a tool that you have to implement the comprehensive plan. That's been recognized by many appellate courts. The next slide also shows in a case that when a county or city follows its comprehensive plan, that the zoning ordinances that it enacts has a certain amount of safety to it. Next slide. next one after that. Yep. So I wanted just to briefly review with you your current comprehensive plan that was enacted in 2022.
Green light.
It is. Maybe I just need to speak up a little bit more, or speak into it. Okay. All right, next slide, Jason. All right, so again, this was legislatively adopted by the board. Next slide. What is the comprehensive plan as it relates to this property? Well, the comprehensive plan, as you've read, speaks all about this particular piece of property, which is just under 1,000 acres. It is currently zoned M2, which is the district that we're here to talk about tonight. And also, it is designated on your future land use map for industrial uses in the future. Next slide. This is a copy of the map. You'll see that the property that the authority owns is right down there in the bottom corner. It's sort of that bluish purple color that indicates that it is a designated industrial. Next slide. Well, what does your comprehensive plan say about what the future of the county should look like? Its number one goal is economic development. And under that subset, it is to have a full industrial park. Right now, the park is largely vacant. I'll go through that in just a second. Next slide. In the comprehensive plan, it specifically identifies this industrial park as being, as I said, unoccupied, and that the marketability of the park is critical to achieving the county's goals and objectives, and that it has tasked the authority with carrying out that vision. Next slide. And I'm just going to read this because I think this is important. The primary focus for industrial development is the Griswoldville Industrial Park. And it says further that, the last sentence, therefore, the marketing of the industrial park should be enhanced through further branding, development of marketing materials, and reaching out to third-party firms. And as I said earlier, one of the main important ways in which you implement the comprehensive plan is through your zoning ordinance, and specifically as it relates to today, an amendment to the M2 district rules. Next slide, please. Also, in your land use element, again, it says, rather than maintaining specific goals or needs related to land use, Jones County and the City of Gray will continually seek to implement their land development ordinances in a manner that promotes growth in accordance with the future land use map. And that's why I showed you that map, which shows that the vision for this parcel and for this area is industrial use. And I'm almost done with my presentation. Just the next slide, please. I think this is perhaps the most important here in terms of a policy rationale in your comprehensive plan. As I've got highlighted here, Griswoldville Park in Jones County is currently being developed with hopes to attract new industries and businesses. And so amendments to your zoning ordinances are the way that you can attract that new business and that new industry. The county generally lacks industrial development today and would like to grow industry to support the community's tax base. All of those things are achieved and carried out through an amendment here. And so with that, really, I'm just here to state that we support amendment to your zoning ordinance to allow for data centers within this industrial park, and here to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the board at this time?
Thank you.
If none, thank you. All right, Ms. Brody, anybody that want to start off with the floor?
Do you have access to your email to email?
Sure, come on.
Jason?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Good evening.
Just introduce yourself and where you live.
James Collins, Mayor Pro Tem City of Gray. I live at 367 Autumn Ridge Trail in the City of Gray. I want to start by thanking this board, Jason, Tim Petrowski, Planning and Zoning. I also want to thank the people that had concerns and issues with what we're talking about tonight, because I think all of that is important. I always quote in the movie World War Z, there's a scene where they talk about that no matter what the situation is, they always have one person that disagrees because it creates a more thought out, a more complete plan. And I think that's what we've done here tonight, and especially seeing some of the changes y'all have talked about making. I love that it's a comprehensive use strategy. And the truth is, we talked the other night about, is this something to vote on? We have voted on this. The citizens of this county voted to make y'all commissioners on this board to make these decisions on our behalf. And likewise, the citizens of Jones County voted in favor of the SPLOST, which I think you would see resoundingly similar if this was to go to a full vote. We've spent 20 years and millions of dollars on this parcel of land. I think that with these regulations, these guidelines, that a data center would be perfect there. You look at so many other options, and there's going to be pros and cons with any of them. I think this has some of the least number of cons when you consider the tragedy in Tennessee where we lost 19 last year in an explosion at an industrial plant. So I came up tonight just to say that I support what you guys are doing. I have faith in what you guys are doing, and I hope to see some action taken, because I think now's the time. We can't continue to wait, can't continue to spend the money and have no impact and no product coming out of this area. So thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you. All right.
Eric Varnado, 449 Etheridge Road. I'm also chairman of the Jones County Development Authority. During our December informative meeting that we had at Tri-County, we were asked about a financial impact study if one had been completed around a data center. So we engaged Economic Impact Group led by Dr. Alfie Meeks. He's a director of innovative economic impact at Georgia Tech. He's has been on staff at the University of Georgia and Georgia Tech regarding economic development. He used the LOCI model he had to extrapolate the data from the Highway 18 project, because that's the only example data we had. But he used that data in conjunction with specific data from Jones County and the Jones County Board of Education from the most recent financial documents publicly available from the Department of Community Affairs, Department of Revenue, and Department of Education. This document that I just gave you, basically it boils down to essentially with about a $30 billion investment over the course of 20 years, which is what's estimated from an example of the previous Highway 18 project. The county would be receiving anywhere from $26 to $30 million of tax revenue a year. The Board of Education would be receiving a very similar number, about $27 to $31 million in taxes every year. That would break down to a project net present value to the county over the course of 30 years of $307 million. For the Board of Education, that would be $337.9 million over the course of 20 years, which would generate a revenue of about $644 million into the county from a project similar to the project that was originally discussed on Highway 18. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone?
Yes, I'm Lynn Duggar. I live out in Haddock. I've been a Jones County resident for about 20 years. I just want to come and thank you guys for the efforts that you've put forth here recently in trying to bring industry to Jones County. In the 20 years I've been here, that's something that's been lacking. And I know you guys know that. I also want to thank the Development Authority. I know there's been a lot of work put in this, and I've talked to several of you individually, and I know the time you've spent and the trips you've made. But I know you've done that in the best interest of the county, and I thank you for that. We need tax dollars to relieve the tax burden on property owners. It's just, to me, it's simple. It's plain and simple. I feel like my taxes are just this exuberant. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you guys know that, and I've been talking to some of you for 2 or 3 years about that, and I know y'all been talking longer about it. I see this data center as an opportunity, a great opportunity, to relieve that tax burden with the property owners. So I'm going to stand here. I'm going to stand here and say I'm in favor of the data center. But I'll also tell you, I don't have the details worked out. I'm not going to stand here and tell you, I'm not going to pick it apart and say, well, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and don't like this. I trust you as county leaders to take care of that. And I trust the planning and zoning folks to take care of that as well. I'm sorry that I feel like there's been a lot of misinformation and fear thrown out on social media, specifically about the water usage. In this study that Eric's talking about from the Georgia Tech professor, it talks like it's a closed loop water system. It's not 1 million gallon a day water usage. I mean, the numbers are there. The numbers are in the study. And I think we just got the study in the last day or two. So there's been a huge amount of misinformation, and I'm sorry that people have to get on Facebook and to spew misinformation. Looking at the acreage in Jones County, over 250,000 acres. We've got nearly 1,000 acres in the corner of the county for an industrial park. Obviously, industry goes in an industrial park. That's where I feel like it should be. So I applaud you guys for what you've done. I want us to keep going forward with this. And, you know, as far as this being a popular stance, I really don't care. But I think we need to move forward with this, and I think it's in the absolute best interest of the county to continue forward with this. You know, and there's some little things that I think about that we hear about.
Pause.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're at our 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So you'll have 1 minute to finish.
That's
and then
fine.
everybody in favor, will have 1 minute. We'll be limited to 1 minute per person after that.
Okay, thank you. Looking at some practical applications for what we can do with tax revenue besides reduce the millage rate, I look at the facility that we use for graduation for the high school. We got to drive to Baldwin County to the Centennial Center to have a graduation. For the prom, we got to drive to Bibb County to have a prom. There were a bunch of mamas that got their feelings hurt because we couldn't sell enough tickets for the homecoming dance. Guess what? If we have tax revenue, we can build a civic center and be able to host events like this. So, you know, I'd love to see everybody chill out, take a look at this, look at it hopefully from a practical standpoint, and there's so many benefits to it. Not only just from reducing the burden on the property owners, but just some of these things that I've mentioned here. But I thank you for your time you spent on this, and thank you for the opportunity to get up here and speak. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm sorry?
So that was exactly 1 minute.
Exactly 1 minute.
That's
Doing
an
good.
example of 1 minute.
Anyone else in favor of this would like to speak? Anyone? All right, if we want to go to the opposed, your 10 minutes is.
So same way, we'll have an initial block of 10 minutes collectively, and then once we hit that, everyone following that will be limited to 1 minute per speaker.
Alexander Lefholtz. I'm at 177 Stewart Farm Road here in Gray. I'll begin by saying that this statement is offered to formally place the board on notice of serious legal defects in the process leading to tonight's proposed vote on the data center zoning text amendment. Under Georgia law, zoning is a valid exercise of police power only when it bears substantial relation to the public health, safety, and general welfare of the public. The Georgia Supreme Court has made it clear that zoning actions unsupported by evidence and inconsistent with the comprehensive plan or adopted through deficient procedures are unconstitutional and void. Conveniently, the Development Authority's attorney left out goal number 3 of the county's comprehensive plan, which states unequivocally that the county will focus industrial recruitment on high-paying manufacturing jobs. What we're being asked to accept tonight is a major economic pivot for Jones County, being justified entirely by speculative tax revenue, without a single independent comparison to other options or impact analysis, without first updating the county's own comprehensive plan. That is our economic strategy, job creation in the industrial park. That position has been echoed repeatedly by state and local economic leaders. 2 weeks ago, Pat Wilson, the Commissioner for the Georgia Department of Economic Development, publicly cautioned against using a county's best industrial site for low employment uses. Daylon Martin himself said plainly at a recent work session that a data center would not be the highest and best use of our industrial park. And our director of the Development Authority, Haley Watson, was quoted just a few years ago that Jones County's target industries are advanced manufacturing, aerospace, and healthcare, because they create, quote, real jobs and real community benefits. She also said something important, that when people can work locally, they buy groceries locally, eat lunch locally, and invest locally, and that is how communities grow stronger. A typical light manufacturing facility pays roughly twice as much payroll as a hyperscale data center, while employing 3 to 4 times as many people. Over 10 years, that difference is not abstract. Payroll becomes groceries bought locally, lunches eaten locally, homes purchased locally, and a broader tax base that does not depend on one single use. Yet today, zoning rules are being proposed before the comprehensive plan is updated, without any public financial analysis comparing alternatives. This is backwards, and this is not best practice. It deprives all residents of informed participation in a decision that will shape this county for decades. What we are also being presented with is a false choice. We must potentially accept a massive data center or accept nothing. The real choice is between diversified, job-producing industry and a capital-intensive facility that uses enormous land, power, and water while employing only a few people. It is not wise to allow a single land use to consume our best industrial site and all of our resources while delivering limited permanent employment. If a project requires large public resources and then also blocks the kind of employers we say we want, that is not growth, that is a bad trade. If a data center is truly the best path forward, the evidence should prove it. We are not anti-growth, we are anti-guesswork. As of now, the county has presented no evidence demonstrating that adding data centers as a use advances the public health, safety, or welfare of Jones County. There is no evidence that data centers fully comply with the comprehensive land use plan. There's been no independent fiscal analysis, no infrastructure utility assessment, no environmental review, and no findings of fact supporting the amendment. The board has not addressed whether data centers are consistent with the county's comprehensive plan, which emphasizes agricultural protection and the development of light industry in the industrial park to provide jobs. Constituents have repeatedly raised these concerns and have provided research showing that alternative uses, particularly light manufacturing, are more consistent with the plan and present less long-term risk. Georgia law requires more than what we are seeing tonight. When statutory procedures and constitutional standards are not met, zoning actions are void. Proceeding tonight without curing these defects exposes the county to immediate injunctive challenge and avoidable litigation. For these reasons, the legally responsible course is to adopt a moratorium, complete the required analysis, ensure transparency, and allow meaningful public participation before taking any legislative action. This statement is made in good faith to avoid unnecessary litigation and to urge compliance with Georgia law. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else against? Like to come forward? Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Bob Lovett, and I'm here to represent the opponents to the action you're taking today, and wanted to point out to you that there were several defects in the process, which I think you all know, your attorney knows, I know, and I'd encourage you to impose a moratorium on consideration of taking any further action on this legislation until it can go back down to the Planning Commission, and they can hold hearings and take comment on it and understand more about it. They didn't have any help from an engineer, environmental engineer. They didn't have any help from their own attorney. They asked for their own attorney, and they were not entitled to have it, and told they weren't entitled to have it, and it was pushed through. And at least one member refused to vote to approve it, to send it up here. And I think he was very vocal and was on the record about the defects that he saw in the process. And so if you want to be fair And if you want to create an economic environment that's fair, then send it back down and do some study on it, hire some engineers to advise you, and then go through the adoption process. And that's the only way you can go through this process and end up with the ordinance that you're not going to be sued on. And I wanted to ask, did you all have the opportunity to go to any data centers and see them in operation?
I have.
I worked in one.
So, have you gone to or heard anything about the ones in South Carolina, the ones in Virginia, and the ones in Minnesota? I'd encourage you to go on YouTube. There's documentaries about all three of those facilities, and it's going on now. So, please conduct a thorough investigation. We'd ask that you vote to impose a moratorium. Don't pass this amendment, and take a step back and review it and take more public comment on it. It's the only fair way to pass it. Thank you.
Anyone else opposed? Please come forward.
My name is Fletcher Sands. I'm Executive Director of Altamaha Riverkeeper. We're concerned that the ordinance in front of the board tonight is lacking some important drinking water protections that safeguard residents. Griswoldville Industrial Park straddles the ridge line separating the Oconee and the Ocmulgee. It's right on the middle of it. Swift Creek on the Ocmulgee side, Big Sandy on the Oconee side. The county water system is located adjacent on both sides. The Masseyville Water Treatment Facility on Swift Creek is a half-mile downstream from the site, and the Hendersonville Water Treatment Facility on Big Sandy is basically on the site, adjacent. Most of the site is located on a significant groundwater recharge area, defined by the state as areas that are highly susceptible to pollution, basically where surface water enters groundwater, right there on the park. That area on this map is shown in red, which is most of the map. That's unique to southern Jones County where this industrial park is. The rest of Jones County is much more confined significant groundwater recharge areas. But State Rule 391.316-0.02 defines a list of protections for these areas, including C, facilities that treat, store, or dispose of hazardous materials are required to do so on an impervious pad with a leak collection system. And D, requires chemical and petroleum storage tanks to have a secondary containment systems for 110% of their capacity. That's pretty important if y'all are allowing diesel generation for the backup generators. A site that would be probably 333 giant diesel generators would require a lot of diesel. Right? We're recommending adding these requirements to section 742319. Further, state and federal rules regarding source water assessment program also requires that Jones County Water System establish a wellhead protection plan for its groundwater wells to include the following: an inventory of potential pollution sources in the designated wellhead protection areas and a management plan for potential pollution sources identified. Diesel is one of those sources, and a lot of other things that are happening at data centers are also sources. We recommend adding these requirements in 74.23 as item number 20. We also recommend that all storage areas for diesel, hazardous and toxic waste, or toxic release inventory listed chemicals be delineated on any future applicant's site plan so you can see where it is on the site in relation to these wells. We also highly recommend adding a PFAS disclosure, and we also think that it would be due to the proximity of the wells and naturally occurring radionuclides in the granite in this part of the state, that you should require any areas that require blasting to be delineated on that map. We urge the board to extend the moratorium on data centers until these protections for the county drinking water system is in place. We did hear concerns from board that the requiring of the mere disclosures of these materials would be prohibitive for data center recruitment. On Monday, I chose to be here at the zoning hearing at the same time that Spalding County was going to hear their third data center coming in. They've approved 2. They have a requirement that prohibits these kind of facilities 7 miles above a public drinking water source, and y'all have one adjacent to this site. We just ask that you seriously consider these recommendations, and if you can add them in today, we'd be happy with that, but if not, we would ask you to do a moratorium so that we can add them in. Happy to work with y'all, continue to work with y'all on those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Make room up here. Sorry for your microphones, everyone. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Oh,
Sorry. You are at, in general, you all are at 9 minutes and 96 seconds, 9.96. So, but the other side, before I stop them, have ran over 30 seconds. So in 30 seconds, I'm gonna tell you when your minute starts.
okay, I have about 2.5 minutes, but I will try to go real fast.
Okay.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is April Lipscomb. I'm a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center based out of Atlanta, work across the state. I want to start by saying that I think y'all are on the right track with this ordinance. I was pleased to hear some recommendations about strengthening it. I do think some clarification is needed to make sure that you all have the information that you need in order to make informed decisions about any potential future data center. And there are a few provisions that should be added to better protect your constituents and the environment from the adverse effects of data centers. So just to jump in, the 200-foot setback is just utterly inadequate to protect residential property owners who might be living around these data centers. 400 feet honestly isn't even enough. Most jurisdictions require at least 500 feet between the boundary and any residential zone district, so something to consider. The environmental impact study language also needs more clarification.
1 minute.
The request for information is really vague. A developer could satisfy that literally by going and doing a quick Google search and then putting out the information they find online in that paragraph. A few things also to consider. I'm going to go real fast, sorry. I think we need more clarity on what is required in the conditional use permit application. So we need a detailed site plan, a noise study that doesn't just look at noise, but also low frequency vibrations, a traffic impact assessment, a water consumption plan so that we know exactly how much water it's going to use, proposed drought management measures. We are in a drought right now. The application should also include an energy consumption and sustainability plan that outlines the estimated peak energy demand, so we know how much energy we're talking about. A transmission line assessment, so you know if there are new or updated transmission lines that are needed and where they are going to go and if they're going to have impacts on county property. A stormwater management plan. These things have a ton of impervious surface. A description of the potential for fire or explosion and certification from the local fire department and response agencies that they have capacity to actually respond to an emergency. And finally, you should request that the developer identify all of the environmental permits that will be needed to construct and operate the facility. So with that, thank you for listening. I encourage you to take some more time, extend a moratorium if needed, update the ordinance, and come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next.
Evening, Commissioners. My name is Evan Pope. I live at 326 Haddock Drive in Haddock. I'm a land surveyor by trade. The Loudoun County, Virginia Supervisor Mike Turner provided 5 variables to consider for data center locations: site, setback, sound, emissions, and power. 3 of these can be mitigated with adequate natural buffers. Mr. Turner advises a minimum of 500 feet natural buffer to mitigate site, setback, and sound. The current text amendment calls for a 100-foot buffer, and I know you recommended a 200-foot buffer. These are both inadequate. To put 100 feet in perspective, that's 33 yards. That's a pot shot with a rifle. That is a medium-range bow shot for your hunters. For your golfers, that's a half swing with a gap wedge. It's not very far. That's 11 parking spaces in a typical parking spot, and it's twice the length of this room for 100 feet. 40 steps for the average height American male is 100 feet. 100 feet would fit twice between Ace and Ingalls. It would fit twice on the Dairy Queen lot, and it would fit twice in the right-of-way of Highway 22. So in order to protect the citizens that neighbor this industrial park, we need to put in this text amendment a 500-foot natural buffer. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Anyone else? Uh-oh.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not gonna be nearly as good as all these other people. And don't start my minutes yet now. So in order to get it all said, I said I'd put it right, but what I'm reading is what I wrote. Anyway, my name's George King, I live on.
Name and address.
There it goes.
Oh, I was about to tell you. My name's George King. I live on Fort Bill Road in Cray.
Thank you.
Okay, I've lived in Jones County 20 years. Chris graded my lot. And I've owned property here for 50 years, so I consider I'm a true Jones County. I've chosen to write my thoughts because I can read faster than I can talk. There are many items in the proposed code that I question, but they're outside my field of expertise, so I'll leave that to others. However, the cooling system is my expertise. I feel confident that the code regarding a closed-loop cooling system is incomplete and could result in Jones County getting something that was not intended. I've been a professional engineer, heating and ventilating and air conditioning in Georgia for 60 years and designed or been involved with many closed-loop systems. A closed-loop system is basically the same whether you're cooling people, molding machines, or computers. The closed loop removes the heat from the computers. How you should remove the heat from the closed loop is what is missing in the code. The original systems that use so much water were based on pump and dump, and they're cheap to operate. The code is taking a good start with the closed loop. However, there are acceptable ways and unacceptable ways to remove the heat from the loop, and I'm sure everyone wants the best way for Jones County built into the code. I could give you a lot of more details, but in 60 seconds, I can't do that. But I will tell you just for a quick reference to the size of air conditioning needed to cool the facility. I don't know what size facility is proposed, but if it was a 2 megawatt facility, the cooling required to remove that heat from the.
So it'd be this way, it'd be at 1 minute. You used your word 1 minute, is that correct?
Yeah, we have to keep it fair.
Yeah, we gotta keep it fair for both sides, so you did a good job though.
Well, yeah, well, anyway, I'll pass one more thing. I was gonna offer to help y'all with setting up the data that you need for this.
Appreciate your offer.
And my only goal is to help the county.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. George.
All right, you did good, thank you. You got a tough rank. You see who you have to follow, don't you? You see who you have to follow, see you?
I know. I just like to send that around for reference here real quick, and then the rest are also for reference. This one's for me and reference one.
Okay. Oh, I've already got this. I got a copy of that.
All right, good evening to the board. My name's Ryan Wilson. I live at 248 Chambers Road. I'd like to bring some things to the board's attention. We mentioned Mike Turner, who's the vice chair, of the Loudoun County, Virginia Board of Supervisors. They've published in this summarization a list of best practices that highlight a couple of deficiencies with our proposed ordinance as it stands now. Chiefly, number 2 in this best practice for communities is to never allow data centers to build by right without governing body specific approval. So that's a win, and I would advocate for keeping that up. They're also advocating for a limited maximum of 55 dB for perceived noise at the sending property line, which is something that's not quite specified to the degree I think it should be. And then also, there are other storage limitations and recommendations for that mitigation. And then the setbacks are also recommended between 500 and 1,000 feet being ideal. So increasing those setbacks would be something that I would advocate for. The second document is you have ordinance section 4.06.02, which is the adopted text amendment that Loudoun County put in, right? They can be a little bit more restrictive. Thank you.
1 minute, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
evening. Mark Mantel, 116 North Oak Street. The gentleman who spoke here, they didn't say one word about health. They said we need to be pretty sure that this is going to be taken care of. Now, I don't like to be a scaremonger or anything like that, but I was reading about this Amazon data center, and they're calling it Cancer Alley. Cancer Alley. Now, the doctors say that it's linked to a cluster of rare cancers. There's miscarriages, loss of kidneys. Now, I want to ask people, does anybody in this room, one person, can you raise your hand and say, I'm sure that in 20 or 30 years from now, that that our children are not going to get cancer out of this? Who can lift their arm and say that? Nobody. And I don't care how many studies is done. The state of science, this is new. This is new technology.
Thank you. All right, anyone else?
I'm Michael Blackshear. I live at 1989 Grizzleville Road. I'm a CFO, CPA, semi-retired. I basically want to ask who is qualified to do an environmental impact study? Is it the applicant or is it qualified engineers independent of everything? Is there no answer? Is there a qualification for that?
Qualified engineers, but...
And we can make a note and answer his question.
Right.
I mean, I've heard of applicants doing it on a piece of paper and it being accepted, and that's not going to work. I have a good well. I don't want it messed up. I'm afraid dynamite might mess with a aquifer, whatever you call the thing, the water source. So I'm extremely concerned about this thing. And I know y'all are going to pass this amendment so we can ram through the next applicant. And I'm not sure I trust your judgment, I'll be honest with you. This thing scares me to death. I've lived out there for 25 years, me and my wife, and I don't want to move. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, we got-
Hi, my name's Teresa Van Horn, and I live at 148 Hidden Hills Drive, which is about a quarter mile from this proposed location. I know that we talked about the closed loop water system, and I asked this question at our planning and zoning meeting to Mr. Gerard. We talk about how the landscaping will be beautiful around it and all of that. Where is that water supply going to come from? I have read articles after articles. I talked to Wendy about this a while back, and I said, I don't know anything about a data center, the pros and the cons, and she said, just do your research. And so I have, and they say it takes even more water to keep up the grounds than it does to run the closed loop system. So just keep that in mind. The employees usually, the average number of employees at a data center is about 7 per data center. Donnie's Propane tried to buy a lot in Grizzleville Park a while back to put a bulk tank on so that they could deliver propane. They were told they didn't employ enough employees. So that's kind of a conflict of interest. The people that are pro for this data center, the ones that we heard were from Peachtree City, Etheridge Road, Haddock, Georgia. None of them live right around that state park. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank somebody else. The young lady in the back. I think you're, yeah, come on. I want you to get at the same time. I'm trying to keep the, okay, you're good? No, you're good.
Okay. Michelle Severo, I live on County Line Road. I'm going to try and make this very brief. Overall, the proposed zoning language appears lawful, but it lacks clarity in key areas that increase legal and governance risk. While local governments have zoning authority, problems arise when known impacts are raised and not objectively analyzed. First, allowing on-site power generation is common, but the phrase other technologies is too broad, invites inconsistent application. Allowing emergency diesel generators by right is typical, but requiring a specific EPA Tier 4 standard in zoning is legally sensitive since emissions are federally regulated. Safer approach is requiring compliance with all applicable federal and state emission laws. Beyond that, requiring board approval for steam power generation lacks objective approval criteria tied to water or infrastructure impacts. Also kind of curious as to who has the knowledge to be able to determine anything with steam power generators. The environmental impact study provision is fundamentally flawed. It lacks defined standards, transparency, enforcement, or required mitigation. As written, the EIS is informational, not protective, and exposes the county
1 minute, ma'am.
to legal risk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Lauren O'Quinn. I live at 1307 County Line Road, and I'm going to make this very brief. I'm reporting information from the Middle Georgia Preservation Alliance. Our county has some very significant historic and cultural areas that might be impacted by this data center project on Griswoldville Industrial Park. It's 1.14 miles west of Griswoldville. There was a pistol factory there in 1850. It's 2 miles south of Lower Creek Trading Path. We know the Creek, Muskogee tribes have settled in this area in the late 1600s, throughout the 1700s. It's 2.75 miles east of Garrison Road, where militia traveled to Milledgeville, Fort Wilkinson, and Fort Hawkins in the first 3 decades of the 1800s. It's 2.85 miles west of the location of the Battle of Griswoldville, fought on November 22nd, 1864. What I'm trying to say is that it says right here in their words, there's little doubt that there are also prehistoric Native American sites in the vicinity of Sandy Creek, which flows just northeast of the industrial park. It is impossible to know how important they might be until they're evaluated by professional archaeologists. All solid reasons for demanding a Phase 1 archaeological survey with a full history of the vicinity, let me finish my sentence, before allowing any ground disturbances to occur at this location. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Hello, Board. My name is Dr. Rebecca Husted, and I appreciate the suggested changes and improvements that, based on what
Address,
we're...
I'm sorry, one more address.
1787 Georgia Highway 18 East.
Thank you.
I appreciate the improvements that have been suggested. Obviously, you have been listening on Monday night. I appreciate that. I hope that everybody won't drink the Kool-Aid and will accept the moratorium so that we can continue to address some of the challenges that we have dug up as a community on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Christine Jones. I live at 1041 Monticello Highway in Gray. I've been a resident of Jones County for 30 years, paying taxes like everybody else. I just want to say that if we must have data centers, we have to get these rules straight. It's for everybody's health. You all live here. So please consider the moratorium, and, we're willing to work with you. It's just, we just have to get things straight right now. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, everybody. I'm Tanya Craig. I live on 233 Fox Road. This AI data center scares me to death. I know too much about it, but I don't have the facts. My son has been fighting in Tweaks County, where he lives. I've lived in Jones County for 31 years. I've been so proud to call Jones County my home. I've worked hard all my life. I've paid my taxes. I'm a good law-abiding citizen. But this is in my backyard. It's not going to just affect me. And there is proof out there that all these other Georgia counties that have put them, next to homes and close to schools. This doesn't just affect me. But I wanted y'all to see my face. I've lived in the same place over 31 years. I was proud. Yeah, and I might have a little piece of land, but I had plans for it. I had dreams. You know, my children grew up playing back there on the creek on my property. You know, but I realized all this is fixing to be gone. You know, and when I signed the petition back in November thinking that, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Anyone else like to come in opposition?
Dustin Riley, 881 Grizzleville Road. 2 years ago, my father Keith had a massive heart attack. We are lucky that he survived. By adopting these ordinances as written, particularly the noise restrictions that fail to address the low-frequency noise commonly associated with data centers, you would be willfully choosing to put him at risk of another one. You would be telling him that his life matters less than potential tax revenues. How many human lives are you willing to devalue in the name of money? Are you willing to inscribe your names on the shovels that dig every early grave that may come as a result of this decision, all for the promise of more money? Is it worth it? Luke 18:25 quotes Jesus as saying that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. I implore you all to think hard about who you are really prioritizing with these ordinances, because as written, you may be telling everyone who lives in and around Grizzleville that their lives are not important to you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Well, I got gentleman coming up here, and then I'll let ladies first, and then the gentleman. Let the ladies first, and I'll let the gentleman go. All right.
My name is Teresa Irby. I live at 901 Grizzleville Road. I was hesitant to come up here because I broke down. Here I go. I'm not going to do this. I am concerned for everyone. I love Jones County. I've lived at my house for 27 years before this property became industrial property. I did not know they were voting to make this property industrial property until it was a done deal, and that ship has sailed. My husband had a massive stroke 4 years ago. He fought hard for his life. We fought together. He cannot handle noise. Please study traumatic brain injuries. I implore you. I sent you emails today. You will understand why I am concerned, not only for ourselves, but for our county. I do ask you to do your due diligence. Do what's best for everyone. I want the county to succeed. I'm not against progress. I'm not saying I'm anti-data center. I'm saying I am not educated enough on the subject to really know. But I do know the subject of my husband and what we will be dealing with, and we will have to move. We won't have a choice.
Yes, ma'am. Gentleman in the back, you want to come?
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. My name's Mel Moore, 753 Chambers Road. I just ask everyone to really think about the time. We've been having discussions about this for 5 months. Building a data center is not putting up a mom and pa's barbecue down on the side of the road. This is a huge construction phase. I've not yet heard anything about who is going to be responsible for supplying transmission to the plant itself. Where's that revenue coming from? Is it solely the people that are going to be building it? I've not heard about anything about municipalities. Nothing about ongoing EPD regulations, keeping up with groundwater monitoring wells on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. Air, I've heard not enough regulations once it gets built. After all the construction guys are gone, it will bring revenue. But once they're gone, what is that going to do for our grandchildren? We need to really, this has struck up a lot of conversation to get education, and I think it's great because you can't, if people don't have discussion, they can't learn. But I just don't think at this time we have enough educated information about how this is going to affect us for a long time.
1 minute. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Anyone else? Anyone else like to come forward? Anyone else? If there's none, we'll Continue.
Mr. Chairman and board members, first of all, if we could we get the actual blue line version put up on the screen? All right.
So that's where I'm at now.
So I'm going to try to go over a couple of the things, and first of all, again, just, superb public feedback, truly. First of all, when a use permit, I need to focus on this again, and it's not advocacy. This is a policy decision. Zoning is legislation, so y'all are crafting legislation. My job is to simply tell you what I believe is accurate with respect to the legislation in front of you, and then let you make the decision as to whether this is what is in the best interest of Jones County. First of all, but I do want to at least address some of the concerns. Number one, with respect to detail, we are proposing, or at least the draft that's in front of you, this is a use permit, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, and that is not the intention. But I say that because a lot of the concerns that are being raised is wanting out of the ordinance what I would want out of it if the data center was an as-of-right use. In other words, you have to curate the criteria for performance, because once you've approved that zoning designation, they have a right to it as a matter of law. They don't have to come in and ask your permission. One of the gentlemen that spoke indicated that a best practice was to make sure that they were never as of right. And I want to make sure everybody understands that. We are not approving tonight a data center, and I know that's obvious to everyone, but just period, hard stop. You are setting the table to authorize individuals or entities to ask your permission to do that. There will have to be signage, legal ads, a public hearing, and a vote by this Board of Commissioners. Data centers, the technology with respect to data centers is evolving, and you need flexibility with respect to how you will consider a proposed data center. So I just want to say that at the outset, because let's do another hypothetical. Let's say you approved something this evening. I don't know whether you will or won't, but let's assume that you did. And then you have an applicant that comes forward and says, well, I want to try and secure both an M2 zoning, if they don't have one. If they do have an M2 zoning, they won't need the M2, they'll need the use permit. Either way, it's a zoning decision. Therefore, there will be notice, there will be public hearings, and as part of the use permit process, there will be detail provided. Now, there's always tension, and I will tell the board that particularly as zoning has evolved, a lot of individuals now want detail in zoning applications that people used to wait on until the LDP or the building permit stage. You all understand what I'm saying? In other words, the citizens, the neighbors, the people that live nearby, they don't want just the permission for the land use. They want to know exactly what is going on the piece of land, where the buildings will be configured, what the setbacks will be, what the buffers will be, what the environmental mitigation is going to be, all of those things at the zoning stage. And of course, the pushback is always, well, why do I have to spend all of that money until I know I have the land use entitlement? That's always the pushback. The use permit paradigm is at least a reasonable way to sort of accomplish both public policy objectives. Because on the one hand, you have a use permit that requires various pieces of data come in at the zoning stage. That's fair. But what I can tell you is that you're going to have that data reviewed by your professional staff. Your professional staff may ask you to retain even a third party to review that data if they feel like they want some expertise from subject matter experts. Very common. We saw this a lot in the legacy telecommunications environment, where individuals would come in like a Verizon or a T-Mobile and they want to put a new tower in, and a lot of governments would say, you know what, we're not in the tower business, and so we want some help with an outside expert to help us review that use permit, that zoning enactment. Same could occur here. That application is then going to be reviewed by staff. It will ultimately make its way to you. You will receive public feedback, public input. You'll have public hearings. You will at that point have a much better sense of, from a granularity level, what exactly is being requested. And then you're going to be able to curate, to design, to develop a set of conditions over and above what is in your code. The whole purpose of zoning conditions that would be accompanying a use permit, and this is from the law, is to mitigate the impacts of the zoning approval on the community. So your code today, again, assuming that you approve this, would be a starting point, not the ending point. And then you would in fact be able to add those conditions that you think are necessary to address that specific application at that specific location with the specific set of environmental concerns that are in front of you in a way that you're not able to do right now. Because why? Because you don't have an application in front of you. That's why. So I say all that again just to try to emphasize to individuals that if an applicant for a use permit for a data center under this version of the code is not able to convince you that their proposal is going to be safe, as much as safe can be in the world, but safe and not environmentally degrading to the county and not unduly impacting to the citizens, you will simply deny it. And that will be the end of it. So I just want to emphasize that. This has been set up to put you in charge, which includes saying no. The environmental baseline, if I can, and to you good citizens out there, this is what I was hoping we would have in front of you. So it's my fault, but hoping to have in front of you as I made my preliminary discussions. And Mr. County Manager, could we go back up to the top again? And this is what I wanted you to see, because this is the product of hearing from the citizens on Monday, hearing some additional voices throughout the week, trying to engage as many of the individuals that wanted to engage as possible. So I told you about some of the whereases. Remember, we talked about that at the very beginning, the stuff that's sort of aspirational. I don't want to really focus on that. Let's go to the first sort of blue lines if we can. Go down a little further, a little further, a little further, if you don't mind. All right, we stopped right there, and I did indicate there's no blue lines on there, but I did indicate that there was a request that the as-of-right use go away, or at least that language go away. I'm not recommending that go away. The language needs to say, at least for purposes of tonight, that there is no as-of-right use for a data center in Jones County. And I hope everybody, if you've not heard a word I've said, I hope you can understand that the as-of-use versus the conditional use is a big deal. That is a big deal. Let's keep going a little further, because okay, stop right there. All right, this is what you all were supposed to see, and you did not see it earlier. And we heard, once again, this was a theme that we heard on Monday as well, and we heard the theme about the setbacks and the buffers. So the language that the board will have in front of it tonight, because they've empowered me to put this together, and this is what I'm giving to them, is the 200-foot setback, and again, the setback is how close you can have a building to the property line. 200 feet from all property lines except 400 feet for buildings or structures that have processes, this is my language, processes within them that generate noise. That is the idea. So if a structure or facility is noise generating, that would be 400 feet. I also want you to look at the last sentence at that paragraph. This setback requirement may be adjusted by the board. Once again, this is a very powerful tool by the Board of Commissioners, should they approve it, that can let them say, you know, look, in this situation, 400 feet's great, 200 feet's great, we want 500 feet, we want 600 feet, because that's what we believe is in the best interests of the citizens and residents of Jones County. A little further, if we can keep going. Stop right there, thank you. I also mentioned to you that the buffer has been modified to 200, so that has been expanded. And then if you can look at the very end of that paragraph, once again, you will see the buffer requirement may be adjusted by the Board of Commissioners by the use permit approval. That would go into those conditions I keep talking about. When you hear me talking about conditions, it's if they received an application, if the board thought it was in the best interest of the citizens to accept it, you would then curate a lengthy set of additional conditions. Think micro legislation affecting only this use on only this piece of property to further protect the residents. If we can keep going, if you don't mind. Stop right there. Thank you. All right, and I just want everybody to see that data center. It was 65 dBA. That has now been changed to 55, and the nighttime is from 55 to 245. Continue going if you don't mind. So there was some concern about the timing of a lot of the data points, the traffic study, the environmental study, some of these data points. We have attempted to clarify that as to when they are required, but again, I've got to say this. Let's say a data point says you provide your traffic study at the time of building permit. Let's say that's what it is, to provide clarity. Does the Board of Commissioners have the right to demand a traffic study during the use permit process should they choose to? Because I'm hoping you're traveling with me where I'm going. The answer is yes. And because the answer is that if the Board of Commissioners is not convinced that this data center knows what it's doing or will satisfy a traffic study requirement, they would have the right to ask it. And if the applicant says, you know what, I don't want to provide that, then what would the Board of Commissioners have the right to do? Say no. So I say that once again to emphasize we have tried to meet some of the citizens' concerns about when are these things required, but I am submitting to you that the Board of Commissioners, even during the use permit process application procedure, would have the right to say, you know what, that's great, you can provide it then, but we want it now as well. We'd like it now. Continuing to the environment, stop, thank you. You read my mind, you're already there. All right. This was difficult for me to explain during my opening comments. It's much easier to read. This goes to the environmental study. So one gentleman asked the question of can you write the environmental mitigation on the back of a postage stamp and send it in? It's a fair question, and I'm not making light of it at all. I get it. The answer is the baseline. I hope everybody heard me when he talked about sort of the evolution of the environmental study has now become sort of a baseline versus a more regimented study. The idea was, and I'm going to kind of circle back to where I started earlier, is what I'm hearing is right now, and again, these are the policymakers, not me, but from what I'm hearing is that right now the industrial park is where the focus is on these data centers, and there has been a lot of environmental studying of that park. So that is sort of a paradigm that I have tried to blend in here, which is an application for a use permit. I'm reading the modified language in the blue. An application for a use permit for a data center shall be accompanied by a baseline environmental impact study, by the way, funded by the applicant, funded by the developer, whoever wants to pursue the data center, acceptable to the director. It is a very common convention in zoning law that somebody has to make the calls on the propriety of documentation that is tendered to the government. And I have chosen the director because I think the director is ably qualified to do it, and that is what I'm used to. So he would make the determination as to whether that baseline study was sufficient to educate the Board of Commissioners with respect to a baseline environmental study. But then, environmental benchmarks, hope everybody can see that, environmental benchmarks over and above those in the baseline study shall be identified by the board upon approval of a permit. Going back to the Board of Commissioners, as part of their use permit approval, will be able to curate, to create conditions with respect to environmental mitigation that they believe are necessary based upon the specifics of the application, and then bake those into the zoning conditions. Therefore, when that applicant, should they get approved, comes to receive their building permit, now they have a much more granular, much more detailed, and much more regimented environmental impact objective and mitigation study to provide. That's sort of this two-step process. Generalized, much more specific. And that's the feedback I've been given, and that's what I've tried to bake into the code. Continuing, if we can. Again, these are just the timing of when various things are required, but as I've mentioned repeatedly, we have the right to require them at any time. Keep going, if you don't mind. A little further. All right, that's the language. I just want it very clear that while this is a code that has a lot of detail into it, the applicants have to comply with all other local, state, and federal regulations. That obviously is the case whether I wrote it in there or not. But again, just to be very clear to everyone here, yeah, you're going to have to comply with all the laws. And if there is a requirement that is more rigorous, more protective of the public health, safety, or welfare in any of those other regulations, the more rigorous controls. Continue a little further, if you don't mind. Yeah, and again, these, I know there was, at one point, there was even a concern about the codification of it and sort of the making sure that when it's codified in the official code of Jones County, the numbering is correct. We've changed and corrected the numbering to make sure that there's no concern that this is really regulated an automobile service establishment. All right, Mr. Chairman and board members, first of all, thank you for your patience with me while we actually showed the citizens and you on the screen the red lines. I don't know what the will of the board is, but I would ask this, whatever the outcome of your debate is this evening, whether it's to approve this or to move on to the next agenda, all I'd ask of is if you want to approve anything this evening, what has just been displayed on the screen, which is exactly what I've put in front of you, that is what is in front of you to approve. And so I would respectfully ask that if you want to make changes or comments to it, we edit off that version. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Anyone like to start?
I have a question for you. So when we see that there's state rules or federal rules in regards to like the source water assessment program, that means that the rulings and the testings are gonna be state and federal mandated, not mandated by us. But when that building permit comes in, that the federal and state, they have to get those testings through them?
What I'm gonna say to you is that when those requirements, I believe that as part of a use permit approval, the board would have the right to say that any federal and state environmental and mitigation test of that kind need to be supplied as part of the building permit application, period, hard stop.
Another question, Chairman. I just wanted some legal advice on, we've had several comments about the legality of the text amendment, the defects in the process, and the potential challenges from a litigation standpoint. What is your thought? What are your thoughts on that?
Right, well, listen, if I would be extraordinary if I could stop someone from bringing a lawsuit. What I can tell you is that I would not allow you to take action on an ordinance that I did not think was legally and procedurally proper.
And I would like to, for the record, Chairman, note that we did go out and retain a very highly recommended attorney to help with this process, and so I'll just leave it at that. And yes, P&Z board, there was a comment that they did not have access to legal representation. That is not true, Chairman. There was time for all board members, including ourselves, for access to legal representation.
Anyone else? All right. What's the will of the board?
Motion to approve the resolution to create the M2 conditional use permit as presented.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second for discussion, Chairman.
Second for discussion.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
To the maker of the motion as presented, that would have been the one presented on the screen?
Correct, with the blue.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Board
all
Member.
right. All right, discussion.
Y'all have any comments or questions?
Any comments?
I'll start off. We read, we listen, and, whether it be a conversation in person or something we read online, we read and we listen. These changes strengthens this. And that's important, because we want to protect Jones County. And I take that, and I mean it. Because, these buffers, it's important. And that's one thing I've several of you all week about need to strengthen these buffers and, make them, and I feel that, if somebody did in the future want to build here in this industrial park, I feel they will be further than what the minimums are. And that's important.
I think everybody on this board has done the homework. I mean, from boots on the ground to going to visit them through a ACCG sponsored trip that I wish I could have went on. We've done our homework. Anyone else?
I just want to get clarification on this one, and I think we can all, on the on-site power generation, I think we all said natural gas as a backup for the generators. In here it says emergency diesel generators are permitted. Can explain that?
Well, most of the all the data centers have redundancies with respect to power, and so that would not be a primary source of power. That's when the primary source of power fails.
But they, I think, they meet the tier 4.
That's right.
Which is the latest and greatest, if you want to call it that.
Right,
The
most
efficient
environmentally
you can
right.
get.
That's
And
right.
they still have to meet the the noise decibels.
I believe there's some allowances for testing, but otherwise, yes, they have to meet whatever the noise criteria are that we've put up on the screen. And candidly, if you make them more regimented, they would have to comply with those as part of an approval.
And in a special use, we could make that, we could change that.
And that's right, and they would be able to say, well, look what's in our code, and you could say, that's right, but we may deny you if you don't agree to this.
Any more?
Chairman, I'd like to make a couple of comments. And I've been accused of rambling before, but so I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But I do want to go through a timeline. So 10 years ago when I came on the board, nobody would have convinced me that we were going to talk about text amendments or data centers. It just wasn't a thing talked about. For the last 3 or 4 years, with ACCG, we go around the state. I'm with NACO, so we'll go around the country, meeting with other states and other counties. And this has been a hot topic. There's been a lot of them been put in Georgia, a lot of them applications in Georgia. So this is not new to us hearing about data centers. Around the 1st of August of last year, we knew that Monroe County, Twiggs County were dealing with data center applications. So this board started talking about text amendments because in one of the planning and zoning meetings, the planning and zoning director noted that as it stands, we have none of these protections that are in this text amendment. We didn't have any restrictions on water. We didn't have any restrictions on septic tanks. We didn't require any environmental studies. We didn't have a requirement for a DRI. We didn't have any noise levels. Our setbacks for M2, as they stood, were a 100-foot setback with a 50-foot buffer. So we started talking about the protections in August. So we sent that through to P&Z. That first original text amendment was approved by P&Z to send it to this board for nothing. In September, the first meeting in September, it came to this board. We postponed it to get more information. On September 16th, we had a work session where we approved the recommendation from P&Z, and that was 4-1 in this board. Then we had an application on September 25th of a data center. That was in the Highway 18 Ag 1 property. That was subsequently pulled on October 20th. October 21st, our board meeting, we implemented a 90-day moratorium and restarted the process. October 30th, we began our work sessions. We created I'm going to call it a working group, where we had the Board of Commissioners, Planning and Zoning, the Development Authority, and representatives from a community advisory group. They chose the representatives. We invited them in. I've said this 100 times. That was not to check a box. That was to get valuable and valid input from the community, and what their concerns were and what they had. So in the first work session, we started with a clean slate of the text amendment. We discussed concerns that they had, concerns that the Development Authority had, concerns that Planning and Zoning had, and our concerns. Everybody drafted a text amendment proposal and sent to Tim. Tim combined everything. In our second work group, we met and we discussed all those. There were concerns from the community group that we did not satisfy in that one. There were concerns from the Development Authority that we did not satisfy in the second group. We all knew that. November 4th, we officially rescinded the original proposal. There was some discussion, we're being as open, there was some discussion about the amount of time that it was advertised. At the time, our legal representation said that to be on the safe side, if you want to rescind it, there's no hurry, rescind it. We opted to rescind it and restart the process, which started the whole process of legal advertisement and discussion about the text amendment. Moratorium's still in place. We're still having working sessions. We're still working as Planning and Zoning. We're still working as Board of Commissioners. At work session number 2, we had all the discussions on that. Then we had, on November 18th, we had a proposal from Haley Watson with the Development Authority to begin a text amendment for creating an M3 zoning. We discussed that, and at the December the 10th work session, which was the third work session, we had what I would call, in our minds, was a final draft. There were definitely things that the working group was still concerned about and did not agree. I had personal conversations with members of that group that said they were pretty close to being on board with everything we said. There were a few discrepancies. I felt like I was close enough on that we could start getting to a text amendment vote. We forwarded that to Planning and Zoning and began those processes. In the meantime, we talked about needing some professional help in the legal area to help us with these zoning. That was, I think it was mid-November when we talked about it, and we had Mr. Gerard retained at the 1st of December. He started gathering all of our information, going through our text amendments, discussions with board members, Planning and Zoning members, and then we had our first meeting on January 12th for Planning and Zoning. That's how we got to where we are today. So I just wanted to be clear on the timeline that there have been comments that our timeline was not proper, was not procedural. We've had timelines twice, and we had a working group, and we had 3 working sessions, and we have talked about this, but we've visited sites, we've talked to engineers, we've talked to environmental people, we have talked to other people that have data centers. I've talked with Spalding County probably 10 times in the last 3 months. Talked with Stephen 3 days ago. I've got a comparison of data center text amendments from other counties. And when we hear people say, well, 400 feet is nowhere near where it needs to be. Spalding County's at 500 feet, but their buffer is 50 feet. So if you're telling me that a 400-foot setback and a 200-foot buffer is not as adequate as a 500-foot setback with a 50-foot buffer, then I'm just going to disagree with you and we'll move on. but that's where we're at. So, we had an email that said that the Spalding County text amendment was the golden standard. The golden standard for text amendments. And when you lay them side by side, there's, other than they have theirs permitted through special exception. We have ours permitted through conditional use, almost identical. We have almost identical to our zoning ordinances. As a matter of fact, the 55 and 45 that we have recommended to go in this, you know what the noise level for Spalding County is? There's not one. There's no minimum. However, in the developmental agreement, for an exceptional, for a special exception, that has to be determined based on the modeling. So that Board of Commissioners has the opportunity, based on the modeling of that project, every specific project, they can determine what it is. I feel like we have stronger guidelines putting a minimum level. That could potentially run, if it's not a data center, does this potentially run people off from saying, okay, I mean, we've had an M2 zoning out there for 20 years with no decibel level. If we had a concrete plant out there right now, we wouldn't even be talking about this. So I think because of the hypersensitivity of a data center, because of the public unknown, distrust, fear, whatever you want to call it, data centers are scrutinized more than any other industry that I know of. And for that reason only, we've been working on this for almost 5 months. I'm only one vote, but I'm going to tell everybody right now, I've never backed down from a decision that I've made that I feel confident about, and I'll stand up and justify it all day long. And I'm here to say, tonight, I've said from day one, I 100% support the opportunity for a data center in the right place, under the right conditions. And in my mind, the industrial park is the right place, and to me, the only place.
Absolutely.
And these conditions that we have vetted and worked through, while may not be perfect, give us the opportunity, when a project comes, to scrutinize it to the level we want to scrutinize it to. And I want to be real clear that there is no application for us to get any of the criteria that people are asking for now. We can't get standards, we can't get levels of noise if we don't know what's coming. So I'm just going to say that, Chairman. I'm going to put it out there, and I'm sure I'll get blasted for it. There are tons of people that do not want a data center in Jones County at all. There are a lot of people that just don't know whether they are okay with it or not because they're not sure. There are people that are okay with it as long as the conditions are right. And there are a lot of people, they may not be as voiceable, as loud on Facebook and other social medias, but I can guarantee you I've had as many phone calls and as many emails saying, we need something for economic development. We need something to reduce the burden on the homeowners. When I ran for this office, I said we needed to have, my campaign talked about the 3 tiers that we needed to have. We needed to have a healthy level of retail, of residential, and industrial. We got 75% residential, 20% retail, and 5% industrial. That has to change, or our taxes are not going to go down. And I pay them just as much as everybody else. So I'm going to get off my soapbox because I have rambled, Chairman, but this is important.
I agree. Like I said, we've all, I heard, again, when I was campaigning, it was all about accountability and transparency. Chris Blindner's the same person today he was 10 years ago. Prior to that, even before I even decided to run for this office. And when I leave this office, I'm still the same Chris Widener with the same goals. I've had I've had so many people call in support, prayers. We're praying for you. I can't imagine what you're going through. We need this. When we were campaigning over 10 years ago, we got to do something with this industrial park. What are we gonna do with this industrial park? Mr. Kitchens, remember this, we got sworn in. The day after we got sworn in, we sat down there and, my finance director came in and said, Mr. Chairman, I ain't talked to him. Weren't even halfway into the budget year, we were already $630,000 in the hole. $630,000 in the hole. This was 10 years ago. Can you imagine what you're saying? Oh my gosh. I got there and took me a walk, boots on the ground. I got almost 6 miles walking that industrial park. Had Commissioner Kitchens on and said, what are we gonna do with this industrial park? We gotta do something. You know, trying to figure out what we're gonna do. How can we make this work? We own it. Failure is not an option. Everybody in this room owns that industrial park. Y'all have paid on it for years. And we had to come up with an option. We finally got to the point that we've got a possibility that we can possibly, whether it be a data center, manufacturer, or what, we have got to that point. It's time. It's time for us to reap the benefits. 20 years this industrial park has been for sale. The state of Georgia has marketed it. The Development Authority has marketed it. It has been for sale for 20 years. It's time. It's the only way you're gonna reduce their tax burden is get some economic development. It's time to put it on their shoulders, not ours in here. And I'm like everybody else. My taxes went up too. It's hard to stomach those payments. It's hard if people ask you, what can we do? We need economic development. We got to have it. That's all I'm saying. Anyone else?
I'm gonna speak from the heart. I've sat and I've researched. I got told that everything that I was telling just propaganda from Meta because I got to visit it. So I've taken a lot of time and I've written down what I'm gonna say. We sit up here tonight at a crossroad regarding the proposed data center ordinances. I know there is tension in this room and I want to acknowledge it directly. This is a difficult conversation. It's uncomfortable to discuss on a large scale. But as your elected leaders, we are not put in these seats to avoid the hard talks. We were elected to have them. When we face the unknown, it is easy to lean into fear-based decisions. Fear tells us to close our doors, stay stagnant, but fear is a poor architect for the county's future. If we make decisions based solely on what scares us, we will miss opportunities to build something lasting. Instead, I'm asking us to lean into fact-based decisions. The data shows that these facilities are quiet, high-valued neighbors that provide a massive boost to our local tax base without putting strains on our school system or emergency systems. To the residents that live near that industrial park, we hear you. We do. We hear you.
Please, we're talking.
Our leadership is committed to protecting your quality of life.
All right, just
I don't need to hear you back there. This ordinance isn't a blank check. It is set with guardrails that include strict requirements from enhanced buffering, landscaping to maintain visual privacy, stringent noise mitigation, infrastructure upgrades that benefit the immediate area. Ultimately, This isn't about you or me. It's about the entirety of Jones County, who put us all here into office, Jones County. The revenue generated here means better roads, updated parks, relief for every single taxpayer in this community. As leaders, we must remember that thinking outside the box means that you never get boxed in. By welcoming innovation today, we ensure Jones County isn't left behind tomorrow. We are making decisions for the students who need the local job or the senior who needs lower property taxes. This is about our future. Let's choose progress over paralysis. Do you know that right now, the ordinance that sit on that industrial park, Amazon warehouse could come tomorrow to the Development Authority and say, we want to buy 900 acres on the rail. They could put up a warehouse. They could service trucks 24/7 hours a day, rail cars in and out at all times. There is no noise ordinance on it. There's no light ordinance on it. They could build it as they wanted because our ordinances say nothing different. They say warehouse. So, in my research, a data center is a much nicer, more friendly than a warehouse that could come in that has no ordinances whatsoever. And this would be an ordinance that we control what they can put there, how it's got to run.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do want to make a correction. I would ask that the decibel level be the equivalent in the morning as it is in the evening. I don't know how a business or computers are turned down at nighttime to make it make sense. So I would ask that it be 65 during the day and at night. And here's the rationale beyond that. The speaking voice for most of the people that came up was between 62 and 65. Some of the women were about 58. When Ken Gerard spoke and the gentleman that had on the suit, we averaged 72 speaking voice. And as I thought about that, I said, wow, you know, there's a 500-foot buffer and I'm right next to Ken. What difference will that make in the grand scheme of things? So that's the one change I'm going to ask. I've been on the board, this is my 4th term, and like Wendy said, we've been kind of stuck and stagnant in some places, and there is some change that needs to be made. We've had the Development Authority Board, which has seen some turnover, but this has been the most efficient board that has come across that I've been exposed to and has made gains in that park, which has made it marketable. As a board, we've been good stewards with money. We've been good stewards with land. I think we've been good stewards all around, just trying to do the best for Jones County. I didn't know what that was when I ran for office. I had no clue, but I know now. And at the end of the day, I think we've accomplished that goal. We've turned down some bad for Jones County businesses, like Sam said and Wendy echoed. There are some really bad companies that probably weren't a good fit for us, not only in utility use, but size and the impact on the community. I was a workforce development chair for almost 6 years and sat on that board for 8 years. And the hardest part was trying to advocate for stuff that we didn't have. We didn't have jobs in the community to support. We didn't have a college and career academy. But those were the missing pieces that we were able to put in place while I was on that board to help create the connectivity for the College and Career Academy and hopefully for jobs in the future. I sat on the Clean Air Coalition and was chair the year that we got Jones County out of attainment. And for those that don't know, attainment meant that there was some particles in the air, mostly due to Brosnan and the way the air blew, that caused our airflow to be a little less desirable, which meant that our fuel costs were higher. And I helped do that by petitioning and lobbying folks in Washington. My goal is not just data centers, it's about the business that could come to the county. In my first term, I put sewer on the ballot for the industrial park. And I didn't know that it would come to this. And I thought it would be something more sexy. And I have no idea what that looks like, but I thought it'd be 4,000 jobs, clean and great for the community, build houses, add to the schools and to the tax roll. But it's data centers, or it could be, because tonight's vote is not about data centers. It's about a landing place for any corporation to come here. If approved, my goal, no matter what happens, is to reduce our tax liability. Since I've been here, I've never voted to increase taxes, and I've always done a good job of trying to reduce county expenditures. It's a thankless job what we do. And if I read Facebook posts, I know y'all don't like me, and I'm okay with that. Some of y'all want me to go back to Africa. That was cute. It's posted. It's posted.
Told us
It's
to
posted.
buy our pallbearers.
Yeah, it is posted. I don't join those pages for that reason, and it became some sort of inappropriateness, which I thought was not indicative of every citizen here in Jones County, because I don't believe that. But what I do believe is that we have to make the right decision for Jones County. And it is making it a great place for the right company, the right fit for our community to be here. And that's the reason why I would support this. It's not for anything else, but other than that. And at the end of the day, if it's a data center, so be it. Hopefully, it is something that we like, because to quote the person who quoted me, I don't think it's the highest and best use, but it is an opportunity if they come. And in the end, if we can drive our taxes to zero, which would be my objective if a data center came, that would be my vote. That we'd have no more tax liability as a residential property owner in Jones County. It would go to zero. Hey, it's that simple for me. But it's the will of the board.
Did you have that in the motion on the?
I would like to make
Motion in a second.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment for 65 dB during the day and at night.
Mr. Chairman, just for a point of order, so what the primary motion right now is actually 55 day and 45 night, so that is what you need to adjust your motion to for those two parameters.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to friendly amendment my motion for 65 dB during the day and 65 dB during the night.
Is there a second? Hold on. Is there a second? It fails for a second. John, you got anything you'd like to say?
I think it's pretty much been covered by everybody. It is a thankless job. And, you know, this week I've had a lot of good phone calls supporting the Board of Commissioners, Development Authority, And I've had some phone calls that were not so pleasant. 16 minutes of somebody screaming that a steel mill would be cleaner for the neighbors, Grizzleville, Fox Road, than a data park, or data building. I have to respectfully, we had to disagree at the end of that conversation. We want what's best for Jones County, and I agree with Dayline Martin. If we could get residential, and it's something you gotta work towards, residential tax liability, it's called it, doing it in a homestead exemption. That's something we would like to work towards. Your apartments, they're still gonna pay taxes. Hotels, convenience stores, gas stations, grocery stores, they're gonna still pay taxes. But your residential, single-family homes, I would love to see that have a significant, if not elimination of residential taxes through a homestead exemption. But Jones County, we can do better. I mean, I volunteered on the fire department for 31 years. I've been in some very difficult situations. And I know the good people in the county, and I know the comments been made are very, I read that, Dayline, what they said. Jones County, we can do better. I mean, there's other municipalities dealing with other unpleasantries in this area, and they can do better. Yeah, but we're here and we do a thankless job. Yeah, I read that. 6 o'clock in the morning, I read that I was going to have to hire my pallbearers after this meeting. And I know who said it. Neighbor. That's fine. He can say it. It's free speech. But we can do better. I believe in this community, and I believe we can do better. But we're here trying to put something into a property. I'd like to see a multi-use in this property. Manufacturing's more than welcome. We'd love to see it. Warehousing, welcome. Data center wants to come in, they're welcome. But it takes a variety of businesses, residential, commercial, agricultural, forestry. It takes a balance. And I talk about balance. It takes a balance to make a community. You don't want to have 90% industrial. You don't want to have 80% residential, because you're going to be out of whack. It takes a balance. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any more discussion?
No discussion, Chairman. I do want to leave on a better note than the bad things that are in social media.
Absolutely.
I've said this to a couple of people, and it really hit me not too long ago. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father are buried in Jones County. Me, my boys, and my grandkids still live here. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not doing anything to hurt this county regardless of what people think. And I'm gonna tell you, I got a phone call yesterday, one of the best ones I've got. Said, you know what? I disagree with you 100%. And I'm gonna be very disappointed. I'm gonna be downright pissed off with you if you vote for this. But I respect you and I love you, and we're gonna be friends tomorrow. That's where we need to be.
Exactly.
So, with that, I'll call for a question, Chairman.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5 ayes, for the record. Citizen comments? You have a citizen comments if you want to come forward. I'm sorry.
Motion approved.
I'm sorry. You got a question?
No, we have one more agenda item. I suppose that needs to be withdrawn.
Yes, that's right, we do.
I make a motion to withdraw the agenda item for
Moratorium.
extended moratorium.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? None, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any citizen comment?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Can I say something, please?
Yes, sir, citizen comments. Again, introduce yourself and you got 1 minute, just like we've been going.
Thank you. My name's Evan Pope,
Yeah.
326 Haddock Drive. I just want to say, what you've mentioned, if it was posted, that's an awful thing to say. I know what post you're talking about. That does not represent the overarching message of the people who've been opposed to this. And I want to make that very, very clear, that those people who said those things had their posts removed and they were removed from the group. Okay? And on behalf of that group, I'd like to formally apologize.
Thank you,
Thank
Evan.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ms. Irby.
I want to mention some of the same that he just said. I have been somewhat involved in that group, not heavily, but I've tried to be very respectful. I do know y'all work hard. I do know this is hard decisions, but when you live across the street, it hurts. And I do not think that those kind of comments come from the majority of us, especially those of us who are close and are heavily affected. And I just want all of you to recognize that.
We appreciate it, but, you know, I hope y'all understand, we gotta take it serious, because there's a lot of things that,
I do understand, but, you know, we're in our 60s and it would be hard to start over, especially now that we're down to one income. So, we'll see what happens.
thank you. Anyone else, citizen comment?
Eric Varnado, 449 Etheridge Road. One thing I failed to say earlier, and it was brought up by someone of opposition, regarding some of the due diligence that's already been done at the industrial park. We've already performed Phase 1 environmental site assessments, cultural resource report Phase 1, Phase 2 archaeological evaluation of that was mentioned earlier, the final jurisdiction delineation, the Grizzleville geotechnical report, the threatened and endangered species review, the waters of the United States delineation, and an air quality report have already been performed on the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on citizen comments tonight? Anyone?
I agree with the person, you said whether y'all approve it or not, that he still loves all y'all. I do too. And I'll apologize to you, sir, for whoever said that. Because I tell you right now, when I go to church, we're all different colors, all different races, and I love everybody. But I'll give y'all something else to consider, okay? This is gonna affect everybody. It don't matter if it's in your backyard, like it's gonna be in my backyard. It don't matter if you're 50 miles away. Yeah, you may get a tax break on your home or on your property, but it's gonna cause everybody's power bills to go up. And that might just be on people talking on YouTube, but it's been documentaries going on, people that actually, there's a person, two people that live on a farm, it's 8 acres, and it's 400 meters from their property. And the woman cut her water on. It come out at a trickle. And, you know, and it was orange color. Okay, well, you know, if I wanted to sell my property now, who's gonna wanna buy it? Is Jones County gonna pay me topped off my property so I can try to move it somewhere else? But what else is scary? Where is there to go? Because every county is coming up with this. And we don't know the long-term effects with cancer and the water contamination. Nobody knows this. This is going to affect our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep everything even.
Yes.
We got one man, but yes, we hear you.
Yes.
We hear you, thank you. Anyone else? Is there anyone else?
I have a question.
Okay, we're just,
In regards to the comments that keep getting made about there's no data center applicant ready to go, I've spoken to your token middleman face to face. I know what plan has been in the works for months. Stop misleading the people of this county, and maybe they'll trust you a little more.
Chairman. Go ahead.
Dustin, I've been open and honest with you since day one. And, well, I'm not talking to you, sir, I'm talking to Dustin. And Dustin, I gotta tell you, we don't have a token middleman. And I'll tell you something else, until an application comes to this board, any other staff member can talk to whoever they want to and do whatever they want to. These 5 commissioners right here are the only ones that make the decisions. So that was an uncalled for comment, and it was not true.
Alexander Leffoltz, 177 Stewart Farm Road. Sam, on the morning of October 21st, you told me to send anything I had regarding the procedural defect to, quote, my personal email, so that it wouldn't be discoverable on an open records request. Thank you.
That's not true, Alex.
I have it on record.
Okay, show it to me.
Anyone else before, we're not gonna have anyone else?
Stephen Hoyt, 299 Riverbend Drive. Mr. Kitchens, with all due respect, I was aware of the first work session which occurred on September the 16th. Am I correct? September the 16th.
That sounds about right.
That is correct. That's documented, public record. I called you on Friday the 12th of September, and I asked you if you needed any clarification on the amendments we had provided from the Planning and Zoning Board. Apparently not. We didn't talk about any. And we talked about the text amendments and the way forward. And Planning and Zoning Board, well, I never got invited to that meeting on September the 16th, work session. And no one else from the Planning and Zoning Board, except for the chairman, was invited to that meeting, and the director. That was the first work session. I just want to be clear. Now, do you disagree with what I just said?
I do.
Okay, well, it's all public record.
Okay.
Also in that conversation, you said whoever brought up the environmental impact study, we're going to kick him down the road. Do you remember that?
1 minute,
I
sir.
do. Okay, so in all
I
fairness.
remember the chuckle right behind it, the laugh.
Oh, I'm still talking, sir.
Yes, sir.
And in all fairness,
All right, we're having a conversation. I'm sorry.
I'm
Chairman.
not 100% clear if you were talking about me or if you were talking about the regulated community, but that conversation was between you and I. So you're either referring to me or you were referring to the regulated community as to coming up with environmental impact wording. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Chairman, I want to respond to that. First of all board members were invited based on Tim sending the email to their chairman. It's not our responsibility like individual board members. We didn't do that. Tim and Jason were in charge of that, so I just want to be clear on that. As far as the September 16th meeting, yes, Friday, September the 12th, we had that conversation. Also on Friday, September the 12th, we get the minutes from the planning and zoning meeting. And in those meetings, and the conversation I had with their board chair, was that Miss Arlene Hamilton brought up cultural issues, Steve Hoyt brought up environmental issues, and I believe it was Kyle Presley brought up traffic issues. Those were, I believe, the three things that were brought up. And my comment to Mr. Hoyt was, environmental issues, we've already started talking about that. There were no environmental impact studies. We were talking about what level of environmental impact study. And my comment was joking because I knew that he brought that comment up. Why wouldn't I have said, well, let's kick the person that brought up the cultural study down the road? Why wouldn't I say, let's pick up kick the person with the traffic study down the road? So it was a joke between Mr. Hoyt and myself because I've known him for many, many years. He is my appointment to that board. And so to make it sound like I'm doing something behind the scenes, nothing makes me madder than somebody to call me a liar or for somebody to call me that I'm corrupt, because I'm not.
Anyone else?
I make a motion to adjourn.
We got somebody coming.
I'm sorry.
You're
Sorry,
all
Ron.
Good evening, Ryan Wilson, 248 Chambers Road. I'd like to address some of the commentary back and forth in the dialogue, especially between the board and members of the community. You've heard the phrase, perception is reality, right? That goes and extends to everybody. Especially in today's day and age, I think people have a hard time doing their research and understanding what the truth is. What a lot of the citizenry, from my point of view, have been asking for and trying to participate in is in the protections being afforded kind of by citizens for citizens before turning over ultimate authority. That's what we're asking for in terms of specificity, in terms of stringency of requirements that are outlined in the ordinance. We're taking lessons learned from other places in the country, whether that be truthful or hearsay or anecdotal. The perception is the reality. And that's what we're dealing with. People are fired up. Y'all are absolutely right. But the fact of the matter is, people are hurt by the way that they've interacted with members of the board and each other. So all I would like to ask, and all I'd like to say on behalf of myself, right, is the community involvement is really, really important. And I think folks are feeling a little bit scoffed. Opportunities to provide meaningful updates, meaningful amendments that are going to protect the community as if we wanted to protect children. That should be the goal, right?
Yeah.
That should be the goal. I thank the board for taking a first step in making some sort of effort to put some restrictions and productive effort towards these data centers. And I would encourage y'all to continue to consider citizen inclusion when considering further text amendments to the local ordinance.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll be real quick. Just wanted to clarify, y'all were talking about state and federal laws. The wellhead protection plan that the county has to complete, it is a federal hand-down from EPA that is, EPD has the authority in the state. However, the county water system has to identify those problems and then give that to EPD. So it's a unique thing where it's top-down, but the information that I'm saying that y'all want to collect has to go from local up. And then just to put a finer point on Mr. George's concerns about the closed loop system, I would make sure that y'all are defining that when you do have an applicant, because that is where all the evaporation and thermal loss comes from that everyone's very concerned about. And so just make sure that y'all are paying attention to that, and thank y'all for working with us on adopting some of the stronger standards that have come into this new ordinance versus the old ordinance. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I get the other half of my minute.
Your 5 minutes.
I know. Anyway, the end of my thing was that there were things we could do, and I was going to volunteer both myself and my grandson, who's also a professional engineer, to help adjust where you would do what we feel is right for Jones County for the closed data center.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
That was
Mr.
all.
George.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hold on.
I just have a quick question. Has there been any discussion as to how the traffic will be handled?
We're not at that point yet.
We would have to have an applicant.
We don't even have an applicant,
Okay.
ma'am. So, I mean, there's no way to come up with a
Well, regardless of whether it's a data center or any other large industry, it's obvious to me they would need more than one entrance in and out. So I was just curious if that had been addressed yet.
all that would come at a permanent time with engineering to clarify what's going to take place.
Okay, thank you.
One more time, anyone else? If none,
Hold on. So, just so y'all know, there are regional plans, there are county plans that ask for public comment. You all should come and be a part of that. When the comprehensive land plan was being developed, it asked for public comment. I promise you, there were less than 10 people in the room. So now you understand how important that is, because if it was in your neighborhood then and you knew about it then, you would have come and made some sort of ruckus about it, but it definitely would have had a plan to place zoning or economic development in certain areas. The industrial park has been in that place for eons, and whatever group decided to do it long before us had placed it there, and there had been at least 2 edits, I think, to the comprehensive use plan since then, which would have been opportunity for public comment. The other thing is, if orange signs come out and there is an application, come back, because this isn't over. This is just the beginning, and your comments and your input is still going to be needed. This is just a framework. We don't have anything in place. So it's not that you're not invited, you're always invited. You're why we're here.
Ms. Dawn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Any more discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for